It's just sustainability, right? Japan is so bad at it. You go to a grocery store, they have the bananas wrapped in plastic. I mean,
one by one.
One by one, exactly. So in this country, do you think that people are willing to buy something older and then renovate it into something new? That was definitely not the case before. That's why you've lost a ton of cool old buildings, and there's still a lot being lost every year because of this. But there is a growing love of older places that is happening. And especially when you're talking about how the price of new buildings in Tokyo and Osaka probably as well has just been going up and up and up every year. More and more people are thinking, oh, well, you know what? We can do this thing where we buy an older place and change up the inside, maybe even the outside. And that could be nice to live in, And it could actually be worth more than it was originally, worth before. So this is slowly getting into the Japanese psyche, and it is getting into the society over here, definitely. But it's a problem when you talk about depreciation, right? Because in Japan, basically anything that is too old will not be lent towards by a bank. Right. So if you're talking about buying, you were talking about Akiya, right? The whole abandoned house situation that they have in Japan. If anything, if you're trying to buy anything that is older than 1980, from before 1984, which is when all properties had to start abiding by the earthquake standards, the new earthquake standards, there's a good chance you're not going to be able to get financing on it.
So you just need to pay it out cash, or you can't buy it.
That is correct. There are banks, not too many, but there are banks that will lend to those, but you're not going to get a good rate. You're not going to get that much loan to value. You're going to get probably half or less loan to value. So, to most people, that just disincentivizes the entire idea of, buying an older place, renovating it, living in it, flipping it, doesn't matter. But you are more and more getting companies that are doing this. You're getting people, both Japanese and non-Japanese, that are doing this. And I mean, I am a huge proponent of that. I love older places that are, well renovated. I did a video on one in Nara. Did you see that video? I'm not sure.
I saw that you did a nice video on your channel recently where you went to this kominka in
in Kyoto.
In Kyoto.
Yes.
Nantan? No.
Yes, I think it was Nantanshi, yeah.
And basically most of the structure is gone, but the roofs and the central pillars are remaining. And
yes.
But the way it's been redesigned is to kind of keep the thatched roof and preserve this historical feel for the place, right?
Absolutely, yeah. That is a rarity, by the way. So in Japan, the rules kind of state that if you keep the original posts in there, then it's considered a renovation instead of a new build. So you could change everything out in there, which
Except
is exactly what they did.
Pole.
Yeah, exactly. So they kept the poles in there, and you can see they actually exposed them, so that's nice. I did another video about a similar thing. I have a friend who has a furniture place over in Nakameguro, and he just loves everything, mid-century American.
Okay.
Right? That's his shtick, right?
I like it too. So I get it.
You get it, right? And he lives by it. He has a 1969 Impala, he loves everything from between the 40s and the 60s, basically. And he bought this house, which it might have been considered an Akiya. So, I mean, by the way, Akiya just means that it's uninhabited, right, guys? But with this one, a lot of the reasons why you find these places is because, especially in Tokyo, in the older parts of the city, you'll find places that have too narrow of an entrance, right? They have a law that says that the width of the entrance, the pathway from the street, has to be 2 meters or more, so about 6.5 feet or more, or else you can't rebuild on it, right?
Oh.
So this is the problem, is that when you're talking about selling this off in the future, as I was saying before, if the structure is too old, banks are not going to lend to it. And, especially if the land can't be rebuilt on, it's worthless, So he bought a worthless house for probably 30% of what the market value would be if it was not the kind of property it was in that area. And he spent a lot of time and money and turned it into a place that it looks like something in Palm Springs. It's just as mid-century American
as it could get.
As you can get. Exactly. And that, even though he basically didn't leave anything original except for 2 posts, that is a renovation. That is not a new build, so he was able to get away with it.
Cool.
Yeah.
But then the idea for people to always, I'm gonna get one of those free houses in Japan and renovate it, is not always a good idea, right? Because it's usually a lot more work than people think, a lot more money and time to get it to a livable standard. Because if it's usually worth 0, then it's also probably because you can't live there.
There's usually a good reason that they are so cheap. I will say that. I mean, look, there's always the exceptions. You just have to be very careful when you're buying the place, and especially if you're not here and you're trying to buy a really decrepit place. Not decrepit, but like, you don't know if it's decrepit unless you see it in person.
Yeah, you can't inspect it, right? You might not see some water damage below. You might not see some cracks somewhere in the wall.
Exactly. So like if you have somebody that you trust on the ground over here that can look at it for you and say, oh, well, you got this leakage from the roof, or, the floors are crooked or whatever, because that's a pretty common thing with the older places. And say, okay, well, in order to fix this up, you need to do this, this, and this, and it'll probably cost it. Like if you have somebody like that, that's fine. But if you're talking about, just like jumping in head first and saying, oh, well, there was a $500 house over in Okayama. I'm like, yeah, that's great. Except, okay, how are you going to get to Okayama every time you come to Japan? It's also going to be an hour and a half drive from the airport. And the house is, on a slope of a mountain that has been known to have landslides. So like there's all these different things. There's always a reason. You do get what you pay for,